originally made in India, but now it was machine made in England. And so for literally, when you think about this stuff, it just blows your mind. Before that, like they took 2 baths a year. The clothes were wool. You stunk to high heaven. And, no one would say, oh, the Great Unwashed. But the aristocrats started bathing every day and then immediately became derisive towards the working class.
Hi, I'm Jim O'Shaughnessy, and welcome to Infinite Loops. Sometimes we get caught up in what feel like infinite loops when trying to figure things out. Markets go up and down, research is presented and then refuted, and we find ourselves right back where we started. The goal of this podcast is to learn how we can reset our thinking on issues that hopefully leaves us with a better understanding as to why we think the way we think and how we might be able to change that to avoid going in infinite loops of thought. We hope to offer our listeners a fresh perspective on a variety of issues and look at them through a multifaceted lens, including history, philosophy, art, science, linguistics, and yes, also through quantitative analysis. And through these discussions, help you not only become a better investor, but also become a more nuanced thinker. With each episode, we hope to bring you along with us as we learn together. Thanks for joining us. Now please enjoy this episode of Infinite Loops.
Jim O'Shaughnessy is Chairman and Co-Chief Investment Officer of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management, where Jamie Catherwood is an associate. All opinions expressed by Jim, Jamie, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Clients of O'Shaughnessy Asset Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's Jim O'Shaughnessy with yet another Infinite Loops. And I have to say, I have been getting the absolute best group of guests in, I don't know, the last year. It's just been fantastic. Today, I have Sam McRoberts, the CEO of VUDU. Am I saying that right, Sam?
VUDU Marketing.
Oh, VUDU. It's spelled differently. Cool.
Yeah, VOODOO was taken, so I went with that.
I like VUDU. That's even better. And where I found you, author of Screw the Zoo. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you having me.
So, these are always really fun for me. We're going to talk about work a little bit. And I want to actually ask you a question about that first, but then we're going to pretty quickly get into like Jed McKenna, Tony DeMello,
Nice.
et al. One of the things that I want you to explain a little bit though is you lead sort of a really cool lifestyle as far as I'm concerned. You're a digital nomad, meaning you spend 90 days in a different country working and living from there. So number one, how is that going? Number two, you have a son, I believe. How are you educating him? And number three, best experience, worst experience. Go.
Okay. All right. How's it going? It's going well. A little harder with COVID, although we've discovered that hiring a van to drive you from country to country is a hell of a lot more fun and relaxing than flying. So with COVID, we do that instead. So we avoid airplanes and crowds. So that's actually been really nice. My son, he is more unschooled than homeschooled, but he was technically homeschooled before we started traveling. And really, I leave his education largely to him. He's self-directed. If he's interested in something, he'll figure it out. And I consider it an experiment, but he's happy, I'm happy. What was the third?
The third, I love that answer. How old is he?
He's 11.
Anna Lorena Fabre. Did you listen to that podcast?
I haven't heard that one.
You listen to it because it's basically
just the synthesis school, right?
Yeah. It's really interesting because it's the first to acknowledge that our current system is shit. It was designed for the industrial era. It was essentially designed. Industrialists said to the states, "Hey, could you do something? Could you like make it easy for them to like sitting in a room for 8 hours without doing anything because, they were going to go to the factory after that. So I think that you might enjoy that. And I bet your son would love, because it's all self-directed. And became a convert just watching these kids, man. It's like if you let a child behave the way they're supposed to behave, I think they are incredibly curious. They love learning.
Super.
They just you have to pull them away from it if time for dinner. So I'm a big member of that camp.
He's a big gamer, so he's learning scripting so he can build Roblox games. He is constantly on with friends, coordinating campaigns and projects and all kinds of crazy stuff. So he'll do just fine.
So cool. The Flynn effect, right? Where the IQ went up so
And then
pretty
down.
dramatically. But a lot of that was attributed to gaming, actually.
I think gaming is a part, and I read somewhere that what was it? It was the addition of iodine in salt may have also played a significant role in it. Yeah,
and
I'll credit it to gaming though.
Yeah, and we're gonna go down all sorts of different rabbit holes. But I was reading last night that the phrase "the Great Unwashed."
No, actually, I don't think I've heard that.
Okay, so that was a term of derision that the upper classes would talk about the lower classes. They would call them the Great Unwashed. And I didn't realize that didn't really come into play until kind of the mid 1800s, because soap wasn't marketed until around that time. And then, so the Empress Josephine, while she was empress, which was a very short period of time, was kind of the celebrity influencer who got everyone to start taking baths with this new thing called soap. And so sure enough, all of the elite aristocrats started bathing every day, right? And they also had cotton now because the Brits figured out how to make cheap cotton, originally made in India, but now it was machine made in England. And so for literally, when you think about this stuff, it just blows your mind. Before that, like they took 2 baths a year. The clothes were wool. You stunk to high heaven. And, no one would say, oh, the Great Unwashed. But the aristocrats started bathing every day and then immediately became derisive towards the working class. Typical,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to you. Best and worst experience.
Best and worst. Oh boy. Honestly, I'd say one of the best is probably just getting to wander around Paris. So we spent a month there, went to everything. So amazing. There's so much to see. All the museums, just absolutely stunning city, fantastic food. And really, really, really good restaurants. I went to the Guy Savoy restaurant there and did their tasting menu, and it was like stupid good. Loved it.
Yeah.
I'd say Barcelona might be a close second though. Worst experience was actually in Barcelona. Our first time there, my wife had her backpack stolen by the waterway. She sat down with my son to eat something and had the backpack sitting next to her, and somebody had just lifted it right off her while she was sitting there. She never even heard him or noticed until she reached for a water bottle and oops, backpack's gone. So that's probably the worst. Although I don't know, actually. Worst, we were in Zagreb, Croatia, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and we were there for their big earthquake. That was nuts. It was like a 5.7 or 8. It was a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was terrifying, but it was probably the worst at the time, but in hindsight, it's kind of a cool experience and we were fine. So 50-50.
So I guess we're probably quantumly entangled because Paris is one of my favorite cities. My wife and I would go there almost every year. Pre-pandemic, we did go to Italy at least once a year, often twice a year, because
Italy's great too.
We just love the Italians and we love everything about Italy, literally. But we love Paris too. And my wife is a big walker. And so I would grumble, but it is the best way to see a city. Is
100%.
just to walk through every part of it. So we've seen Paris that way. We've seen Barcelona that way. We've seen all of the places we've ever gone. And so I'm a bit envious of you because it sounds very cool to be able to go from place to place. Now, how about your work though? You're an SEO consultant. Do you find that being on the road constantly, is it helpful for your work? Hindering? What?
Neutral.
Neutral?
Doesn't affect a lot. So, I mean, people who have websites, I help them get more traffic from Google. I do a lot of consulting with different agencies, random companies, some big, some small, but it's probably one of the best skill sets you could have if you want to live anywhere and wander around, because it's all online and it's very asynchronous. Like there are no emergencies in SEO, or almost none. So it's nice.
That is nice, and this nice segue into all things Jed et al. So my friend Dan Jeffries is sort of an elite programmer. He can literally work from anywhere in the world that he wants. And so like you, he bounces around. He is a little more, he stays places longer, but he is able to do that. And I just think it's pretty cool. I guess I could do it too. I mean, we've got Zoom, we've got all these things.
Yeah.
But so let's go into Jedland. Your book that you wrote, Screw the Zoo, I read, I loved it. And I liked the way you let in to it, because I had kind of a similar experience when I was reading something. You basically credit Tim Ferriss with the awakening, if you will, about how life doesn't need to be lived under the terms of this pre-existing social contract. But then also Jed McKenna, who I always call the fictional character known as Jed McKenna, because I've always thought that he was a fictional character. And I always thought that I loved it because it was essentially so meta that a fictional character was telling you that you're a fictional character. What do you think?
Like it's amazing. And I didn't realize it the first time through. I had no idea. I thought this was some guy named Jed. And like, I was like, I wonder if he's related to Terrence McKenna. But yeah, it took me a while. And once I found out that it was a pseudonym, I was like, wait, really? Because I get the whole finger and moon thing, but I've always had a knack for reading people. And if I can see somebody and spend a little time with them, I get a really good read on them. And so I was hoping he was a real person so I could find a video or something and like get a read on him to see, like, is this bullshit? Is this guy suffering from some sort of schizoaffective disorder? Like, is he actually enlightened? I don't know, but it's hard to get that read without actually meeting somebody. So that was funny. I guess we know who he is now, but he doesn't want anybody to find him. So
yeah. And so I used to be like that. I used to want to be in the same room with somebody because I had similar skills in terms of reading people. If you're with somebody, micro expressions are really important. The way they hold themselves, the way they carry themselves, the way they say things. You can get I don't know, 70% of it, like what we're doing right now, over, because I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, but you can't get it, and nor can you get any of the pheromone information, because like that's nowhere to be found.
Yes, you're missing that. You're missing the energy. The
energy is a huge one. That was a monster one for me, because like. I was saying to somebody recently, and it actually grew out of that. Anybody who continues to insist I'm in charge here is not in charge here.
So true. That's so true. Yeah, the loudest person in the room has the least control.
Always. I mean, it's like it's axiomatic almost. And the other one that I just can't, it just for the life of me, I cannot figure out why people don't get this is, don't mistreat people's assistants. You have no idea how badly they can fuck you if they want to.
Or I mean, anybody, servers, like just
everybody.
All of the people. Yeah, like just treat everybody like nice. Why? I don't get it. When you see somebody go off in a restaurant or go off to what they think of as a peon, it's like, not smart.
I just don't understand why people just don't get that being kind to people. It pains me that this is now seen as some kind of advantage. What happened? What do you think?
I don't know, and I can view this from a couple of different angles. So one, a while back, Elon Musk said something to the equivalent of the most entertaining outcome from the perspective of an observer, not a participant, is the most likely. And tying that into Jed and the fact that this is all one big drama, sometimes I wonder if it isn't just a show, if they're not just acting out their script and it's for me to observe and be amused by. And I don't know. I don't know if that's it. And then on the other hand, assuming that this is all real, I think a lot of our social cohesion bits are decaying, in part because of social media, in part because of just the constant flow of information, the slant from journalism, always focusing on the negative to get the eyes on their ads. It's really messing with mass psychology. And then you get like the weird group dynamics. People think something is normal because it's getting called out by the media. And even though it's maybe a 1 in 10,000 event, the media makes it look like it's a 1 in 10. And so now they adjust their behavior and their mindset as if this is a norm when it's not. And then it becomes a norm, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't know, it's some mix of those.
Yeah. So I stopped watching TV news like 12 years ago. Just because it was like, I can't remember why, but I was watching something and it was just so ham-handedly wrong and so obviously just bullshit. And
Yeah.
like, I looked at my wife and I said, I think we should just literally stop watching TV news. And I got to tell you, it's one of the first things I tell people, stop watching TV news. It's just propaganda. And one of the interesting things that I'll get back from people is they'll be like, you're absolutely right. Those guys on Fox, it's all lies, but NPR does a good job. And I'm like, dude,
Nope.
No, it's all propaganda. What you're watching are two zombie tribes fighting it out with their talking items. They're all brain dead. The indoctrinators are fully indoctrinated themselves. And it's like, I'm not so sure that I agree with you on social media. So I think that social media, well curated, is going to be a massive advantage.
Yes.
And it's going to follow a power law, as it always does, right? The Matthew effect. You study amoebas all the way to monkeys, all the way from ants and bees to human beings. It's all the same. We all do it the same way. And so the unfortunate thing about complex adaptive learning systems is, the ones that aren't cutting it, like apoptosis happens if it's your immune system, and they have built-in suicide instructions. Cells that are not being of any value to you die. And you know what you call a cell that refuses to follow those instructions?
Answer.
Yes, indeed. And so it's like really hard for people to kind of accept that there's a lot of us, and myself included, that so much of our programming was done before we even had a say. Like, whoa, wait.
Hugely, yes.
And go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, like I agree with the social media well curated. It pretty much anything is what you make of it, but it's the incentive stack. So as a marketer, I have a lot of insight into the marketing incentive stack and the way ads work. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with ads where you make money based on views as opposed to clicks, you're incentivized to do all of the dirtiest antics. Like if it bleeds, it leads. It's been that way forever. It's still that way. And unfortunately that, especially it depends on the platform. Twitter is more click-based than view-based, whereas Facebook is view-based over clicks for a lot of stuff. And so different platforms have different incentives, but ads in general are one of the worst possible incentive drivers for bad behavior, I think, which is the downside to social media. The other half is that there's so much anonymity, and so you have no skin in the game. Like it doesn't mean an anon can't put out really good material, but if you don't really have any true skin in the game, if you can just throw away the anon and start again, like you don't have the same set of incentives as somebody who's there, who has their name on the line, who's going to stick around for a long time. And so you get worse behavior. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
actually, I just responded to a tweet that somebody put up, and said the notion of taking responsibility, and I said, that's why in the past, in previous eras, like almost every company was named after the guy who founded it, right? And that was done for a reason. The reason being there was no one who was going to come and save him or her if they fucked up. And putting the name on it put their reputation on the line.
yes.
And there's a lot to be said for that. It's
Also
like,
probably makes it a lot harder to get ousted via, acquisition, hostile takeover. Like if your name's on the company, they're going to want to keep you around so you don't scare everybody off.
exactly. Well, I also have I have a lot of friends who are anons, and for the most part, they are what I kind of call soft anons. They're anon, but like if you want to find out who they are, it's really easy to do so. And for most of those people, they're anon because they work at a financial institution, for example, that
Sure.
doesn't want anyone on social media. And so like I get it. And I personally, doesn't bother me. I've had a lot of anons on the podcast.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm like you. I think, put your name on it, man. Let's put all your skin, let's put your soul in the game.
There you go. I like the soft anon. I like the idea of breaking them into two camps. Because you look at, I don't know, look at any tweet from any big name, like something from Elon Musk or maybe Chamath Palihapitiya's latest FUBAR. But you look at the comments, right? It's a string of anons spewing vitriol, no skin in the game. And you go and look at their profiles and look at their past tweets, and it's the same thing, right? They're probably bots, sock puppets, state-sponsored something. And there's so much of that. And as long as you have that ad incentive, so like Twitter knows they have a problem with bots, sock puppets, state-sponsored accounts. They only prune out the ones that are most problematic because the other ones drive ad impressions. They have no incentive to get rid of all of them. They could. I absolutely believe they could. It wouldn't be that hard programmatically, but they don't.
Yeah, well, and incentives, right? So I've studied incentives for all of my business life, and they really do matter. And you've got to be really careful because sometimes you think it's going to work and not. And everyone always gives the British Raj
Cobra effect.
but also they had one with rats where if you brought them a rat tail, they'd pay you for it. And so, of course, what does your average entrepreneurial Indian do? He breeds rats, cuts their tails off, and then keeps breeding them. So, incentives. I've also found that there are incentives well outside financial incentives that sometimes, if you structure them right, can work like even better. Because I think your average human is somebody who wants to take pride in what they do. They want to feel like there's a purpose to what they're doing. Now, I look, I believe life is a canvas that you paint your own masterpiece on, right? I often call it sort of getting to the bridge of nihilism. And the challenge is you got to go across the bridge, because across the bridge is where you are like, you know what? There is no exogenous meaning to life, but that means that I get to pick my own adventure, and I get to decide like where meaning lays for me. What do you think about that?
I think it depends on where you fall on the free will debate and like the nature of reality. I would like to believe it's a choose your own adventure and I have a say in it. I'm not sure that that's the case. I generally operate as if it is, but I'm always holding in the back of my mind the knowledge that this may not be I may not have any free will whatsoever. I may just be operating according to a script and programming that I can't fully see, and that's that. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good one to chat about a little bit. So the whole free will thing, like I don't even read all that stuff. And the reason I don't is I don't know if I'm right, whether there is free will or not, but I have determined that my life goes better if I act as if I have free will. And because that's a slope that gets pretty ugly pretty fast. Because if you think that if you make the case for you don't have free will, well, agency goes away. You can't retain an agency if you never had it in the beginning, right? If agency goes away, then so does responsibility, because it was my genes, Judge. That's why I killed all those people. It's my script. I'm the murderer. There's a great passage in the book Apotheosis Now that is the author edited Hess's Siddhartha, and I collect a lot of art, and for a reason that I really didn't understand, to be honest, I really like this artist who would do portraits of people but with no face. And then I read the passage in Siddhartha where his guy who had been traveling with him, I can't remember his name, but anyway, he becomes enlightened when he's sitting by the stream next to Siddhartha, and he says he no longer sees Siddhartha. He sees thousands of faces, a baby being born, an old man dying, an executioner chopping somebody's head off, blah, 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 blah. And it's a beautiful passage. I put it up on Twitter. So I just think that operating as if we have free will is probably better, not only for each of us as individuals, but for society in general.
I think that seems like that generally should be true. Where I get hung up is on the Zen concept of surrender. So what are you surrendering to? If you surrender and things flow along as they're supposed to, that would seem to indicate that the only choice you maybe made was surrendering. And now everything else is operating on autopilot, which would indicate that you're not in control and therefore you don't really have free will. So do you work to surrender and let the universe carry you where it may, or do you resist and exert what you believe is free will to try and change it? I mean, I know which one is the more entertaining. Like, it's by far more entertaining to exert will and try and control things and, edit your story as you go along. But I don't know if that's true.
So, I mean, this is really interesting because this is the very topic I've just been writing and thinking about. And I was doing it for a friend who asked me point blank, you've said so often, release the tiller. You quote Zorba, the Greek, you lack one thing, boss, and that's madness. You need a little madness to let go of the rope and be free. And so trying to tell somebody how to get into the state of woo-wee, actionless activity, is like, you can't do it with words alone, right? And so I can just tell you my own experience, which is, I think that flowing with the ebbs and flows of the universe is possible, but it isn't possible all the time. And I would use just my own experience I would say that I would be in a go with the flow state about 65, 70% of the time. And that's really cool and it's really enjoyable. And I'll write threads, I'll write a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not even consciously thinking about. But then there's the 30% of the time that I'm not in the fucking flow. And
Yeah.
you know what I love about it is, to pick up on your thing, it is entertaining when it's usually much more entertaining when you're watching somebody else. But I've also come to the point of view that I've fucked up so many times in life that if you can't laugh about it and learn from it, you're doing it wrong, right?
100%. I feel like laughter, you have to be able to laugh at almost anything in order to get through it, because life is absurd. But yeah.
Go please. I don't go.
No, I'm still trying to, I'm forming my thoughts on your, so you're talking about the percentages of control and the degree to which you have it. Yeah, it's more entertaining. It's more entertaining if you assume that you do. I also think it may be a case of putting the cart before the horse. So one of the things that Jed pointed out repeatedly is that there are a number of things that people will say, and you can't like work on those things to get to enlightenment. This is something that comes after. So it may be that the surrender is something that only comes after when you're no longer you. There's nothing to hang on to, and so the surrender is the natural state. Same thing for just releasing the sense of I or attachment. Like, you can't force yourself to drop attachments. They drop naturally as you go through that awakening process, and then when they're all gone, you're not attached to anything. But it wasn't so much that you worked on disattaching, you just worked on observing. So I wonder if the surrender is another one of those things.
It could very well be. That's an interesting perspective. Because one of the things that I have, I guess, learned the most from are all the deletions that I've made. Not the additions so much, but the
Yes.
deletions. And like I have kept journals since I was 18 years old. And like when it's really great to do because there's nothing like being called a liar in your own handwriting. Our memories try to do us kindnesses. I'm using an air quote here for people who are listening, by updating our memories with what we think now. And I have seen this in myself so often, and I see it in other people all the time.
I think, and I don't know where we get this implanted, but we have this concept that a memory is this encapsulated thing, kind of like an inside out, right? The little memory spheres, and that it's all neat and tidy and complete, and you can pull it back out whenever you want. And that is not even remotely the case. We
Not
store,
even in the same ballpark.
yeah, it's like we have the lossiest storage algorithm ever. And whenever it's time to remember something, what you're really doing is reassembling an approximation of it on the fly, often with little pieces changed because we don't store the exact thing unless you have an eidetic memory. But so you're pulling something out, and then every time you pull out your memory, it gets re-encoded with all that new information that's fucked up, and it happens over and over again. So it's like playing the old game of operator. You remember something a handful of times and the original thing is gone.
Yeah, and it's so funny. So I have a very good memory for anything I read. I wouldn't call it eidetic, but it's close. I mean, like I can look up over here and tell you a lot of quotes from the book that I'm reading right now.
Awesome.
But what I can't do, and what I suck at, is pretty much everything else. In other words, I don't have a great memory for like conversations, unless they're like really intense, and you know, I prefer the transcript, right? Like TV, forget it. It's like I don't really remember anything of that at all. And the only exception there was when I was a kid. I decided I was going to memorize 100 poems, and that has paid more dividends in my life than almost any other thing I could have done, because what it allows me to do is make an association much faster. And when you can make that association much faster, people are like, "Whoa, how'd you know that?" And you're like, "Well, I really didn't, but because I memorized that poem, that made me think of this, which made me think
Yes.
of this." It's kind of the
Yes.
whole memory palace thing.
Yeah, I think that is actually the better way to think of memory, as like a lattice work, a framework that you pin things to, and the more things you have pinned up, the larger your lattice work, and the more you can make unusual connections. So
Yes.
you get true Renaissance men who they dabble in so many different areas, go deep in a handful, and they can pull together concepts that just aren't immediately apparent to others. So I think that's great. I mean, doing anything you can do to expand that lattice work, especially when you're young, probably pays enormous dividends.
Oh, totally. And like that, I work a lot with younger people, just because I like young people. I think their brains are firing so fast, and I just find it really cool. And if I can be helpful, I like to be helpful. And one of the things that I often recommend is what we've just been talking about, but can I tell you that my take up rate is like close to zero? They're like, memorize something, dude, you're old. Why would I ever do that? I can Google it. And I said, yeah, but can you tell me who wrote The World is Too Much with Us, Late and Soon, Getting and Spending, We Lay Waste Our Powers, Little We See in Nature That Is Ours, We Have Given Our Hearts Away, a Sordid Boon. And they just
If
stare
I
at me
Google it,
like,
yeah.
but the other thing that you're able to do, because I agree with you entirely on this ability, the lattice work and the ability to connectedness is really what we're after. We're not really after, because information, like we have our perception filters are not built for the amount of information that are hitting our
Not remotely.
senses, not even remotely, right? Information theory was written long ago, and it gave us all of this, which okay, very cool, I love it. But we definitely are not meant for it. In fact, I was talking one time to a psychiatrist who had a speculative theory that what schizophrenia was filter failure. Essentially,
Interesting.
that
Yeah.
what was happening to these poor people, and I have a cousin who's schizophrenic, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. They were perfectly bright, because that's the other connection. Schizophrenics are often very, very smart. And so he was telling me, yeah, he said, okay, so you and I take in X number of bits per second, and our brain like sorts all of the other ones out that we never think about. With them, it's all there. And he goes, that explains the voices. It explains, like, because they're there and you and I just are able to filter them out.
Yeah, the latent inhibition, I think it's called. It's fascinating, and I don't know how much studies that there's been on this, but like the idea of the Shannon limit, I don't feel like that's fixed. I think that probably scales with IQ to a point, and that's part of why extremely high IQ people can flit across so many concepts and hold so many pieces of data simultaneously, whereas other people tend to be lost. If somebody's done a study on that, I would love to read it, but but you reach a point where it's just too much.
Yeah, so Claude Shannon, one of my heroes, along with Feynman. And I think that I did come across a study, and I'll look for it. And if I find it, I'll send it to you. Because about your statement with the ability with G, which stands for general intelligence, the old IQ test that we can't give anyone anymore. I had Robert Plomin on, who does genetic behavioral work, and I found it fascinating. And he's the kind of guy who, because of his openness, because of his preceding almost everything he says with, if other research proves this to be wrong, I will say this is wrong and give the credit to the new research. So in other words, wait, what? A scientist actually using the scientific method?
The proper scientific method? Yeah, exactly.
How quaint. But so yeah, G, the correlates of G are just like, you have to willfully ignore them if you want to stay within the Overton window today.
Yeah.
And so that is a very interesting thing. I do think that, yeah, some of the smartest people I've ever met have that ability. And I was talking with another friend. Actually, his podcast is going to drop right before yours. And we were talking about people who are very creative and the association with seizures, cluster headaches, which I used to get, a variety of painful events, right? And so I just started my research on that, so I don't have any info on that. Have you thought about that ever?
I have a little, and I have a couple of guesses. One, I think so again, tying to IQ or G, I guess your brain runs primarily on glucose. The more intense your mental activity, the more of that glucose you burn through. I imagine somebody with high intelligence is essentially running an overclocked computer. So they're sucking down more fuel, more glucose. So they are probably more likely to be hypoglycemic, more likely to drain that glucose and get headaches, because that's the response from your brain, I believe, when your glucose is low, is you start to get headaches and feel shitty. So I imagine that it's probably tied to that in some fashion, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's really interesting. I thanks for the hypoglycemia, because my sister has it and it's all beginning to make sense. But I want to get back to Jed. And are you a big DeMello fan or not so
I love
much?
DeMello. DeMello is like, yeah, I think I've heard you say the kinder, gentler Jed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He's,
And
he's, a, he's a great entry into that space to not make you feel completely like shit.
exactly, that's right. And so I love his work, and yet I'll tell you, man, on attachments and your willingness to give attachments up, he is straight gangster about it. And and I don't have it in front of me, but essentially the gist of it is he's talking about love.
Yes, the chapter on
And
love. Yes.
I mean, like, I embrace that. I actually, on my wife's 60th birthday, I wrote her that exact sentence that DeMello has in his book. And like, she was like looking at me like, do I not know something? What's going on here? And I'm like, no, I'm just think he's right. I think he's right, because
Yes.
literally, because then when people, and I think I get more pushback on this than on any other concept. Like,
Hugely taboo.
I could tell people, actually, remember that last scene in Men in Black where our universe is in the marble that the alien kid is playing with?
I love that.
They're fine with that. That's okay, no problem. But the minute I touch love and give them the DeMello lines, like, people get really, really upset. And so I was talking to one person, and my wife took it much better, interestingly enough. But it's, if you add to it an ad lib on it, for our listeners, DeMello basically says you should be able to say to someone you love that they are free to pursue what they wish to pursue. They are free to live their life in the manner that they choose. They are free to, if they want to, leave you and go elsewhere. You have no claim on them. You do love them, but it has to be without provisos and quid pro
Yep.
quos.
Yeah, he
But-
essentially is saying that love as we think of it is just attachment. And real
Exactly.
love is something completely different, with no attachment, but just pleasure, just an enjoyment of who and what they are when they're there. And when it's gone, c'est la vie. Yeah, which is
And
terrifying to a lot of
it
people.
is. It is to a lot of people, but like, the minute I read it, I had those kinds of thoughts bubbling around. And of course, I'm sure because I was reading, I'm a lunatic and I read everything. So I read everything Robert Anton Wilson wrote. I read everything Jed wrote. And then I started on Tony, and I came across that, and I'm like, first I was like a little bit shocked, but then I thought about it, and like, the extemp I had on it, which got my wife to really understand it, was, think about it for a minute. How narcissistic and controlling would I have to be to say to you, another human being, that you are responsible for my happiness? That is insane. When you put it that way, it's like, Sam, I've just met you, but from now on, I'm going to make you responsible for every one of my moods, and God damn it, you better make me happy. You just see the insanity of it, right?
Yeah. And that's what we do, right? We attach so many of our emotions to the actions and ideas of others. How could you ever possibly be free when you have so many puppet strings?
Yeah. And so, like, that's, part of the, you had a quote that from my friend, actually, Erica Jean. And the quote is this: you take your life and you take it into your own hands. What happens? Something terrible. You have
Nobody
no one
to blame.
to blame. But see, like, I hate that idea, because like, I am just, life gets so much better, at least from in my way of looking at it, when you retain your agency. And so, like, every time I try to make a list of when people are saying, well, like, how can I get this done, etc., and like, I'll be talking about it and whatnot. And so there's this whole group over here like, for example, perseverance. You know, as Babe Ruth said, it's really hard to beat the guy who just never gives up, right? And so I'll say perseverance. Calvin Coolidge, who was best known for never saying anything, I think the longest thing he ever said was this quote on perseverance. And yet I always have this group, and I bet you know this group too. That's survivorship bias. Well, okay. So we then can't study anything. We can't come to any conclusions because other people came to those conclusions and fucked up or drove their car off a cliff or whatever. This kind of swings back to your idea about free will a little bit, right?
So the idea, I like this. Yeah. So, and the people who say, oh, well, it's survivorship bias, I think you're missing a point. Like, it's sure, I think there are a lot of examples that we have of somebody who persevered and succeeded, and the fact that they succeeded may be survivorship bias, but that doesn't mean that perseverance wasn't a factor. So it could be that, yeah, like persevering will not guarantee your success, but failing to persevere may almost certainly guarantee your failure. That
exactly.
Makes perfect sense.
Invert and make and learn via negativia. And what's really interesting is I had a chat with the founder of Gumroad, which is dropping pretty soon, and that's his deal. He's basically like, the way he looks at the world is, I'm just going to keep persevering. And he went through a bunch of shit where he took VC funding. He probably shouldn't have taken it. Instead of like begging for more, he was like, no, I'm firing all the employees except for myself. And even himself, he didn't take any income from it to make it right. And anyway, we got on this subject and he's like, the way I look at it is really kind of straightforward. It's I persevere and I don't make it, but I die doing what I love. I die like trying. And he goes, but if I succeed, well, great. What do you think?
I forget who gave the baseball example, but it's like a world-class batter hits maybe 1 ball out of 3. And so it's not about being perfect. It's about number of times at bat. Totally. It's just a statistics game. Yeah.
It is so easy. And I try to make the simplest arguments that I can about that and like about anything, right? It's just like, and what you run into is this shrink-wrapped programming that I think is totally fucked up. It's fucked up from the point of view of an individual. It might not be fucked up from the view of society as a whole. And by the way, I'm not saying that there's some conspiracy, some grand conspiracy out there. I'm saying that,
emergent property.
Exactly, right? I mean, it's like, okay, we don't want Mad Max, so we got these commandments. Look at them here. But look at the first 5 of those commandments. Hear me, O Israel. And then he gets into, because if you don't, I'm going to smite your ass down and really bad things are going to happen to you. And I was reading the book Happy by Darren Brown. And he's got this passage in there. I should have printed it out so I could read it to you, and I haven't memorized it. But it goes along the lines of, think about the actual results of a society that has original sin as one of its main concepts. And then when you think about that for a minute, and I have 3 grandchildren, sure. And like when I was holding my youngest grandchild, Langdon, and looking at her innocent, beautiful face, and I'd been reading the book, and I'm like, oh, well, of course, if you actually believe this myth that, you know, there was an Adam and an Eve and they fucked up by seeking knowledge, just that alone. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'll take Roman and Greek myths much quicker.
I vastly prefer the like Eckhart Tolle interpretation, which is like the original sin had nothing to do with the sin as it's explained. It was simply shifting from the state of enlightened to non-enlightened, going from knowing that you're one and you're everything to acquiring knowledge, which is then separate and starts you down that path of duality. Like that's it, the original sin. And so you think about it, it would really be the exact opposite. Any kid is born essentially with no knowledge, no attachments, they're as enlightened as you get, and then they form all of those along the way. So they fall well after birth. There could be no original sin in that sense.
I love that. That's a great. I'm gonna think about it from that angle. I really like that because I always try to frame things so that people with a wide variety of beliefs can get some benefit from them.
I don't know anything. I suspect a lot of things. Some things seem to be true. There are a
Yeah.
lot of things that we would call laws. They're axiomatic and they apply everywhere we've looked so far, but nothing rules out, the possibility that it's wrong somewhere or incorrect for someone. And so it's
So boom,
strong beliefs weakly held.
We are so simpatico, because that's a Richard Anton Wilson quote that I always use, which is, I don't have any beliefs, but I have many suspicions.
Many suspicions.
And like, so if you're like that and you learn to train yourself to be a probabilistic as opposed to a deterministic thinker, life just gets a lot better. I was having a really long conversation with a guy I'm working with who is like, he has some really bad beliefs, and like he's very smart, and he's built himself a nice little mental prison. And like, I'm trying to help him break out of jail, right? And one of the things that he just has the hardest time with is this idea of like there is no grand purpose. There is, like, man created God in man's image, right?
That's how we've reinterpreted it. Yeah.
Well, because we had to, right? And I get that, but this idea, I just see so many people on these wild goose chases where they're trying to find the overriding meaning and reason to life. And it's kind of like, I always throw the Doug Adams 42 at them, like, and they don't like me doing that.
If you figure it out, let me know. The more I poke, the more questions I find. It's questions all the way down, not turtles.
Yeah.
But I have no idea. I don't know. And like, to your friend's perspective, like, okay, maybe there's meaning, maybe there's not. If you don't know and you don't have any way to know, then pick a way to operate that makes you feel good and operate according to that. If you can do it, it's fine.
And so I started down this path for that very reason, for a very pragmatic reason. And my pragmatic reason was, I realized that my reality goggles were very, very badly smudged, and that I needed to clean them off a little bit. And so I started reading the Tao Te Ching. I started reading all of that, the Tao of physics, because I'm really interested in those things coming together, a lot of poetry. William Blake, most people don't understand that it's been around for a long, long time. William Blake, who was a mystic English poet, said the doors of perception, if they were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. But we essentially see things through this tiny crack of the cell that we built around ourselves.
Yeah, you've got that in early Christianity as well, right? We see now through a glass darkly, or the idea of a veil, or all the way back to Plato and Plato's cave. The idea that we're not really seeing reality as it is ancient.
Yeah, and so Heraclitus, a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher, literally, he was the first guy that was like, "Hey, everything's changed. You can't step in this." It's his quote. You can't. The man cannot step in the same river twice, because he's not the same man and it's not the same river.
I love that quote.
And it's a great quote. And so it's just like, what? As you kind of study the history of knowledge, right? You see this incredible activity with the Greeks and with the Romans. The Romans were more practical than the Greeks, but they took all the good stuff, right? They were the ultimate freeloaders. But then all of a sudden, Rome gets sacked, and whoops, 1,000 years of darkness. Do you think that we have a chance for another 1,000 years of darkness?
I don't know. I think we need to release a lot of the stuff that we cling to so fervently, right? I think we owe that 1,000 years of darkness largely to religion. Religion took
Yeah.
over and became the dominant force throughout the world, and it determined what was and wasn't acceptable and what the rules of reality were. And there was no, dissenting opinions were met with fire and death. And I think until we can step back and stop taking religion so seriously and look for the messages that are hidden in there that aren't immediately apparent and the non-literal stuff, I don't see how it'll change. I mean, I don't expect to see any sort of in mass enlightenment or in mass waking up. I think it will continue to be a few people at a time for a number of reasons. But I hope that with technology, because it is such an enormously long lever, that the small number of awoken people may be able to pull us in a better direction, but we'll see. So far,
Yeah.
technology is a double-edged sword and it's not looking so hot.
Well, obviously, clearly, it is a double-edged sword, as you say. I'm a huge fan of Deutsch's The Beginning of Infinity. The reason I always am going on about his book is because I've read it twice. The second time I read it, I got a lot more out of it, because what he does is he doesn't just flippantly say shit. He builds this foundation of,
Yes.
this is what happened. And then we thought that we could only see the world through our senses. Ooh, well, that was wrong, but it was a step in the right direction, right? And so he basically is one of the best things that I got from him was, pessimists or the precautionary principle. Religion dined out on that one for those 1,000 years, because if you really want to figure it out, follow the money, follow the power, and you can see, of course.
Yep.
Of course they're going to say this. And then we had the Enlightenment, and they're like, yeah, not so much. No, I don't really agree here. But what he says that we fail to do, and this is like, Feynman would say, you can't fool yourself, and remember, you're the easiest person to fool.
Easiest.
Which is totally true. And so one thing that I didn't really keep in the forefront of my brain is something that he hammers at in that book endlessly. And that is, we slip up by thinking that we know what future knowledge is going to be. We have no idea. And he's got a great quote in it, which is, what arguments were physicists in 1900 having about nuclear power and the internet? None, because they hadn't thought of it.
Yes.
They hadn't thought of it at all.
We're not wired for exponential thinking. We're wired for linear, because the environment that we evolved in was linear. It was roughly the same set of things for many lifetimes in a row. We didn't have to think of compound growth. And now, thanks to technology, we are now living in an exponential reality. The brain can't keep up. It's stuck 50,000 years in the past. And so things are wild.
So I do think, though, that there is a lot to be said, and there's a lot of evidence for aggregate social evolution. In other words, that our bodies, mine and yours, are affected. Our actual shape of our brains, me and you, are different than those of people who can't read. And so literacy literally changed the human brain. There's a really good book about this, The Weirdest People in the World, and why we are the way we are. But so we're all getting rewired currently by these bad boys. I'm holding up a cell phone for people who are listening. And the research that I've done into this is, our brains are getting rewired. So yes, mama evolution, right? Darwin's evolution, right? That is a very, very, very slow process. But aggregate social evolution is a thing. And we are, in fact, as Deutsch says, he harkens back to the old school, man is the measure of all things. But his twist on it is, well, for right now, as best we know, we are currently the only explainers and builders in our little corner of the universe here. If we find other people who or things that are able to do this, fantastic. But for right now, we're all we got, and we're the best at it because our brains have evolved to be able to conceptualize, build a symbol stack. And as you build that symbol stack, things get more and more interesting because you can think of new and different ways to like come up with stuff.
Totally.
So, kind of back to Jed McKenna and people being like just almost unable or unwilling to communicate with each other. I mean, I did this thing called The Thinker and the Prover, and I paraphrased Kipling in it.
I like
Where I
that.
said, humans are all islands of differing beliefs shouting at each other over seas of misunderstanding. And so, like, one of the things that I just do, I've trained myself to do, it's like, I just like mute immediately. If somebody is like saying something stupid that I find stupid, I don't block them because I think that there's maybe a 5 to 10% chance that they're just having a bad day. And like they got pissed off at something or I triggered them, because I do put up some things that trigger people. And like, especially the Tony DeMello quote, man, on being able to look at love that way. Woo! I mean, that was a tough one. But so I have no interest in trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm not selling anything.
Yes. That's so I use social media largely to think out loud. It's like
Yes,
I'm
same with me.
tossing things out. Here's a current thought. I've been thinking about it. It's on my mind. See if anybody else can surface anything interesting. Give me, another rabbit hole that's tangent to go down, something like that, right? Like it's never static. My opinions change. I'm a radically different thinker now than I was a year ago, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and I expect it will continue to be that way until I die. So don't assume if it's out there, it is impermanent, as I don't hold anything as very seriously.
Yeah, I'm
But
the
yeah,
same way.
I think that's the way it should be. But yeah, I mean, you put anything on social media and people often assume that you're like picking a fight, and they jump in there to
Right.
try and convince you how you're wrong. And it's like, I never said I was right. This is,
Right.
I've observed this or thinking about this, but yeah, sure. I mean, if you can show me another way of thinking of it, thank you. But I mute and block depending on the situation. With muting, they can still show up in your comments and other people have to see it. So your fans have to see whatever they're spouting in there, and you no longer can see it to police it. So that's the downside. I block more aggressively if I think they're just, their pattern of posting is really stupid or really antagonistic. Like if they're not showing good faith, they're gone. If they show that they're locked in a pattern of thinking that's I consider low tier, if they're stuck somewhere like religion, or I can't deal with it, and I don't want to have to see or go back and forth with that. I'm looking for a very, very select set of people who are open and constantly looking and searching and not fixed and not combative. And so I'm cleaning my house by blocking. And some of them just go too far. I had one person, they were an idiot. And I was like, this is stupid, blocked them. They created a fake account on LinkedIn to track me down and send a message to bitch about what I said on Twitter. And I was like, this is exactly why I block idiots. I don't need you. I don't need you in my life. It's just
Yeah.
some people.
And then it kind of brings us back to like, what is the nature of reality? I don't know. I do know that I got far enough. I started, and I told you, I started this for pragmatic reasons, right? I think that knowing helps you know what to do.
Yeah.
And
I made that case, like in that article that I think you read it, The Nature of Reality. I explored that, and that was essentially my case. Like, there are these set of possibilities, and I clustered them into 7 like thematic buckets. But essentially, depending on which is accurate, that does change the way you play the game. And I feel like I'm looking for. I know I'm in a game of some sort, and I'm trying to find the rule book so I can figure out how to play the game the best possible way. And I don't have that.
Right. And exactly. And so that does not dissuade me from trying to continue to learn. And more importantly, as I mentioned earlier, what I'm learning is it's far more important for me to delete beliefs that are wrong than even like get those that are right. One of the things you mentioned that I happen to agree with is that, virtual reality, like, your thoughts on it are, I think, pretty much similar to mine, that it probably is going to happen, and
inevitable,
it's probably
I think.
inevitable, right? And that's the way I try to think about things in the practical sense as well. So I always try to think, okay, so what's the end? Where is the end? And so, like, one of the tools that I use is how were rich people treated in America and the UK in 1925, 1930. Well, they all had drivers. Hello, Uber. Well, they all had multiple homes. Hello, the multiplicity of
Airbnb, VRBO,
Airbnb, and then that stratifies, right? And like one of our things, which is customization of portfolios, that's exactly how those people had their money managed, just for them. And then you think, well, retail, with the tools that we have right now, this will scan my body and I'll get my bespoke clothing a week later. You also have an interesting thing about robots, which I tend to agree with you. But as I was making notes before our podcast, I was reading your stuff on robots, and you make a really good point, which is, guys, less or maybe a century and 50 years ago, like 70% of the people in America were farmers. They were tied to the land, right? And so you posit robots, and the question I wanted to ask you is not replicants, as in
humanoids,
and or fabricants. Have you read Cloud Atlas?
I've seen the movie. I haven't read the book.
Oh, you got to read the book.
Okay.
The movie just does.
The movie was weird.
Was weird, and it also does. He's my favorite literary fiction author.
Okay.
And the book is a masterpiece. You've got to read the book, because
I'll read it.
In the book he's got and it jumps across time, and basically in the far future, and he has it set in Seoul, New Korea, because of all the fuck ups that happened along the way. But they have fabricants, what they call, in that, and they're humans that are bred to be basically slaves. And so they don't have any of the higher functions, supposedly, right? But try and fuck around with the
New World stuff.
Yeah. But when you try to fuck around with a complex adaptive system from the top, things emerge from the bottom. And one of those things happens to be an enlightened fabricant, and the story goes from there. It's really, I think you would really enjoy it.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. And so, but you think robots, you think we'll program them with Asimov's rules for robots?
I don't know what we'll end up using for rules. I think it'd be incredibly difficult to find a set of rules that had no potential for loopholes or exceptions, right? Like unknown unknowns. We can only go so far. But I do think that we'll continue to follow the trend of using automation to get rid of laborious tasks that suck for humans to do. Or like, we can do them, but we're not optimized for them. They're not pleasant. They're just necessary. And I think the not pleasant but necessary stuff will all end up going to machines at some point.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. It should. Because if there is kind of my own little personal theory, which I have absolutely no idea whether it's correct. Probably is not correct given the odds, but that we are evolving as a species.
Yes.
Not all at the same rate, not all in the same manner. Timothy Leary had a great thing on the various imprintings that happen to us, and that you can re-imprint with psychedelics. So I'm all for the legalization and use of psychedelics as first and foremost as medicines. Like I support a group called MAPS that has been shepherding this forward. And like, what kind of person do you have to be to say, no, that veteran who tried to kill himself because he had PTSD and was serving our country that caused him to have that PTSD, no, you should not be able to give him psilocybin.
It pisses me off. All you have to do is look at a harm scale, list of substances and their relative harm. Like alcohol and tobacco are near the top. Everybody's fine with that. But psychedelics are literally at the fucking bottom of that list, and we have a problem there. Like,
yeah,
really? Yeah.
It's
no,
so
they're non-addictive, man. They're non-addictive. Animals that take them only end up taking them once. Humans develop tolerance to them so fast that you really can't abuse them. Like it's absurd. The reason that they're illegal, that they're Schedule 1, is because of what they do. They rewire your brain. They help you to disconnect from a lot of your belief systems, and they make you question everything. And nobody in charge wants people who are questioning everything.
Exactly. And also because the lunatic occupying the White House at the time, Richard Nixon, needed a convenient fall guy. And like, by the way, the drugs that those kids were using on the street, that wasn't real LSD. That wasn't real psilocybin, unless they actually found the magic mushroom and ate it. And so like they did the same thing. If you know your history, they actually made movies like Reefer Madness. I don't know if
I remember.
ever...
Yeah. I don't think I've seen it. I feel like I've seen clips, but I definitely recognize the name.
Sam, it is a treat. Watch it. It is
right.
So hysterical how ham-handed they, and by the way, propaganda is getting more and more sophisticated. They still are using Bernays, template because it works. But it's getting more and more sophisticated, but so are people. And so like, if you keep hitting the same lie and trying to turning it into a truth, what's also happening is the people are going like, we just fucking stop. Oh, we know that isn't true. Just stop.
It's comical to watch. Like, we used to be so good at propaganda, and it's like, really, like this is what passes for good propaganda now. That's
well,
wow.
It's because I think it's because we've gotten much more sophisticated. We've upgraded, our knowledge base,
and we have so much access to data. I think being able to quickly go and search things, find papers, find citations, Snopes, like it's so easy to pick things apart if you'll take the time and effort to do it. And the amount of time and effort is diminishing, so it gets easier. Yeah.
And easier and easier. And all right, so this has been super fun. I recommend everyone read your book, Screw the Zoo, because it's a great book and it's a great metaphor. A lion in a cage is not a lion anymore. It's a captive. It's a prisoner. I love Africa. I love going there and watching animals in nature, and it's made me fiercely anti-zoo. Because man, when you watch a family of lions just hanging out and the play, I mean, like lions, they got it right out in the wild. Play and hunt when you need to, but be free.
Yeah. You take a creature out of its environment, the environment that it's supposed to be in, and it changes the creature. Like, it can't be what it's supposed to be if it's not in a conducive environment. Yeah.
And the other thing that I would add, and then I'm going to ask you the questions we always ask at the end, is there's another example of this that is equally horrid. And that is that in parts of Asia, I don't think they do it as much now as they used to, but I know it's still being done. When they capture a wild elephant, they chain it to a huge stake. Okay, it's massive, and given all the power of this mighty beast, and man, I'll tell you, having seen them close up, they are fucking powerful.
Yeah.
But so it'll fight for the first like 2 weeks. It'll fight, and then it will give up and
Learned helplessness. Yes.
learned helplessness. They can then take a tiny stick with a light rope that the elephant could just move his or her head and be free, but they have created a prison in their mind.
Yes.
And it's so brutal because we do the same thing. All right, my friend.
Sure do.
I'm going to make you the emperor of the world. You can't kill anybody, no re-education camps, but what you can do is incept them. So you are going to be able to take the world microphone and whisper, because what we want this to be is we want people to wake up the next day and think they had this idea on their own. What 2 things are you going to incept in people that you think would help?
I don't know if I can think of 2, but I think one would just be to incept the idea of probabilistic thinking. Drop certainty and look at everything in terms of percentages, likelihoods. Like, don't hold anything so seriously. And maybe a second would be, what if life was a game? How would you play? Give it a shot. See how that goes.
That's wonderful. I love that second one. The first one, that's one of my hobby horses that I'm on all day, every day. Stop with the 0 to 1. Stop with, this. Yep. No, yes, no. Most things are MU, which is it's neither one or the other. All right, 100%. My friend, 100%, 99%.
99.9%. There you go. Yep. Good one.
Sam, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. All of our listeners, they can find you on Twitter. What's your handle there?
Sam's_antics.
I love that.
Yes.
And you also, they can find your book where? Screw the Zoo.
Amazon.
It's on Gumroad. It's on Gumroad.
I only have it on Gumroad. It's free. I took it off Amazon for a bunch of reasons, but yeah.
Oh, I wish I would have known that. I would have asked you about all of them.
Round two.
All right, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.